This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News. And as part of our series of interviews with leading candidates in the forthcoming election for the West Surrey Council, I am now with Claire Whitehouse, who's one of the Green candidates. She's standing in Guildford South West. Claire, welcome to the Guildford Dragon. I think this is the first time I've spoken to you on the Guildford Dragon.
Yes, that's correct, Martin. Yes.
And well, thank you for giving your time for this interview. Now, you've stood in several local elections before, I believe. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah.
And how long have you been a Green Party member?
Since the summer of 2020.
Right, okay. And why do you think it's important for Guildford South West voters, or in fact, Guildford voters generally, to vote for a Green candidate?
Because having a green voice in the room helps to change policies and strategy and implementation such that it takes on a more human focused um, viewpoint. And also because in terms of the budget, Greens are more likely to want to have the money management aspects of local council so to support the provision of services and the protection of community assets. And that's the direction that we come from.
Okay. Now, before we concentrate on local issues, um, can I ask, do you support your leader, Zach Polanski, and all he says about international and national affairs?
I support my leader, and I think he said some very sound things, particularly about wanting to make sure that there is more talk before decisions about conflict are made, about going into conflict. I think he has some very good things to say about a wealth tax. As you know, the Greens are a broad church, and so long as we represent party policy fairly, then we are also entitled to have a personal opinion on matters as well.
Okay. But do you accept that your party's increasingly left stance alienates many who would wholeheartedly agree with you on environmental issues?
Um, I think that there will always be people who might be pushed away from certain political parties by some of their policies. Um, I think we have to remember that national politics is very different from local politics, where people want local issues to be addressed. So there may well be some members of the population who find more left-leaning policies not to their liking, but there will also be members of the population who find right-leaning policies not to their liking.
Okay, but some might say, well, I know the Green Party because of their stance on Palestine rather than on water purity, for instance. That is that what you want to portray as a party?
I think there, there are a lot of aspects to this. Um, I wouldn't want people to drift away from the Green Party because of the Palestine issue. I think primarily that is about trying to reduce conflict.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get back to the local issues now. And first of all, which party do you forecast will win most seats in West Surrey? Do you think any party will have overall control?
I tend to avoid doing political predictions, Martin. I think psephology is a sort of dark art, and it is. I think it's foolish to fall into the trap. As somebody who's campaigning, you have to believe that you have an opportunity to um, be voted in as a councillor. Now, in terms of overall control, I really wouldn't like to predict it.
Okay.
We have a Conservative controlled Surrey County Council, we have a Lib Dem controlled Guildford Borough Council, and then we have uh, various shades throughout the whole of Surrey. Um, so no, I wouldn't predict.
Would you at least agree with me that this election is probably one of the most unpredictable in recent times?
Yes, I would agree with that. Yes, I
Okay.
do think it's unpredictable.
But you have said that, that voting for a Green would have a Green voice in the room. That doesn't sound as if you're expecting to be in overall control.
Um, Fair enough. No, the Green Party in West Surrey is not expecting to be in overall control, but we want to be in a position where we can call to account the party that is in overall control and ask the difficult questions, sometimes difficult questions.
Okay. Now, your pamphlet says you're an engineer with a strong background in evidence-based decision making. With
Mhm.
that experience, what do you think of the local government reorganization? Do you think it's a rational way of organize a rational change? And do you think it will improve local democracy?
I think the local government reorganisation has been rushed. I think it's a great shame that we are not able to put forward coherent policies with regard to the debt issue, and exactly what the structure of the new council is going to look like and how it will function. But that is the responsibility of the shadow unitary to try and address in the time that they've got. Um, Personally, in hindsight, and hindsight is always great, um, perhaps we would have been better to have had our elections last year and not delayed them by a year, and that would have given us um,
More time.
locally a greater time, more time to actually address um, the really big issue.
Okay. But do you think that by the councils getting bigger, it's going to dilute the localism aspect of politics?
Um, yes, I think there is a risk that the localism aspect of politics will could be diluted. It's going to be very difficult. So, for example, in Guildford Southwest, we have 8 councillors representing that area, going down to 2 councillors, and it is going to be challenging for those 2 councillors to be able to represent their constituents or residents in Guildford Southwest across the entire set of services that are going to be provided. Um, so that is going to present a challenge. I think that in itself may lead to a more remote unitary council that doesn't have such a great um, knowledge or feedback from the very local aspects of representation.
And from your campaigning experience, talking to lots of people on the doorstep, do you think most people care?
Talking to people on the doorstep, there is a core of people who care. There is a core of people who are concerned, who are able to articulate their concerns about what is going on in their local area. And it is this core of people who councillors need to listen to, because the core of these residents, um, they can observe what is going on in their local area. They're able to explain what's going on in their local area, and they're able to explain their concerns about what's going on. And I think that matters.
But what
That
about
matters.
the others? What about the others?
They have the opportunities. The opportunities are there. If we're going out canvassing, knocking on doors and trying to speak with people, then the opportunities are there for people to express their opinions. And we're happy to listen whenever people choose to express those opinions.
So why are we failing uh, as a community to get more engagement in local politics, do you think? I mean, it's not, I mean, this isn't a pointed criticism of your party, it's across the board. And I share it too, as an editor of a local. I try to encourage more local engagement, but we all fail, don't we? Why is that?
Why is that? I think 2 reasons. One is people have a lot going on in their lives. Nowadays, it takes 2 incomes to support a household. People have to go out to work. they've got their families to make sure that they're looking after. There is a lot going on, and politics can seem like a distraction from that, can
But
seem, or
sorry to
in,
interrupt, but I mean, though
or,
you could say the same thing in France or Germany, but they have much more engagement with their local politics there, and I'm sure they have similar pressures and in their daily lives. Why is it? Is it? I mean, my theory, and it's no more than that, is that people feel powerless. They say, "I'm not bothering to vote. It doesn't make any difference."
okay. I think that that might well have been part of my second point, that people,
Sorry. Okay.
when speaking on the doorstep, people will say, my vote doesn't count, my vote doesn't matter, why should I bother? Um, and to try and counter that, we try to explain why it matters. So, for example, in this particular unitary council election, this is the first unitary council that we've had. We're having a big step change in that. We have a lot of grey areas that we don't know what's going to be happening in. So it's important for people in each ward to be thinking about, okay, who's the candidate who is going to be able to cope with that degree of ambiguity? Who is the candidate who's going to be able to explain to us what's going on? And that's what we try to tell
Okay.
people, residents on the doorstep, to engage them. But there is a certain sense of disillusionment
And do you
amongst.
think the reorganization is going to help people feel engaged?
I think there is a big risk that it won't help with that,
Okay.
because the Military Council will be
More remote.
remote, more likely to be remote. It may not be. Maybe
Okay.
we come up with big ideas about how to reach out to residents and encourage them, but
Okay.
it runs a big risk, I think, of being
Okay.
remote.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's turn to the elephant in the room, if you like, which is the huge amount of legacy debt the new council at the moment is set to take on. Um, how can the council start off with that? How can it operate with that amount of debt? £4 billion, 4,000 million pounds. How can it operate with that amount of debt around its hanging around its neck? It's going to be effectively bankrupt from the get-go, isn't it?
Yes, as I understand the situation, it is going to be effectively bankrupt, and it is going to be difficult to operate, um, because there are going to have to be difficult decisions made. So the shadow unitary council from now on, sorry, from the day the results are declared up until April 2027, is going to be looking at and negotiating on the terms of this debt, is my understanding. And hopefully they will be looking at the terms of the debt in such a way that services can be protected, and not just statutory services, but some of the discretionary services
Let's
as
just
well.
explain. Let's just explain that every council has statutory obligations, services they have to provide, like
Yeah,
education and
education,
adult and
housing.
childcare, and they have no choice on that. And that represents a majority of their spending. I think, if I'm right, about 75%. Do you think that's about right?
I think it's about right. Certainly adult and children's
Yeah.
care
So
represents about 60%.
yeah.
Yes.
So they don't have much room for maneuver from the
Yeah.
within that. And then, of course, with this huge debt and all the interest that needs to be paid on it, I mean, it just makes it all impossible to imagine, doesn't it?
It makes it very difficult to imagine. Um, so ultimately, I think the step is to try and protect our services and to try and protect our assets as much as possible. Um, there has to be continual lobbying of central government to forgive this debt. That has to continue. If our local MPs across Surrey are doing this, I think it would be good if they were more vocal that they were doing it. And I think where possible, as a local community, we need to there needs to be some organisation in the local community to represent our views about the debt to Surrey County Council as it currently exists, and the borough councils, including Guildford, as they currently exist, so that any decisions made by the outgoing councils are made in awareness of what local people feel about this debt. And if there are any meetings of the Shadow Unitary Council, then again, local people need to be going in and asking those questions to try and focus the mind. Otherwise, my fear as a Green is that there will be a drift towards acceptance of having to pay off every last penny of this debt and every last penny of interest. And I think that that would be very unfair on the constituents of West Surrey.
Okay. And do you, as an example of that, would you find it acceptable to sell off assets in other parts of West Surrey, including here in Guildford, to pay off this debt? For instance, if someone said, well, Guildford House, the art gallery, is worth a couple of million, let's flog it off. Would you find that acceptable?
Um, at first, no.
No. Okay. Fair enough.
Straightforward no answer, then the answer is
Well, that
no.
was a very clear no. So that's good.
Because we're here as, sorry, making an assumption there, as councillors, there is a duty to support the community in whatever way possible. So Guildford House, the art gallery, any support that comes from the council is probably going to be discretionary, okay? But it brings the community together. It educates the community, it brings the community together, it provides a locational focus for the community, if you like. And so therefore, my answer would be no.
Okay. Um, Now, I don't know if you had a chance to read any of the House of Commons library briefing papers on unitary authorities. Um, have you?
I think the answer to your question would be no.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I had a look at one of them, and it said, only published in February, and it said, ideally, the first elections to any new body should take place ahead of the date of the reorganisation. Well, that is happening. So that the initial strategic and budget planning is shaped and directed by newly elected councillors. That is simply impossible until this debt issue is resolved, isn't it? You can't make it. How can you have a financial strategy when you don't know how much money you've got?
That's a good point. It makes it very difficult. And my understanding would be that actually the current thinking is that a financial strategy includes a proportion that is going to be paying off the debt. I'm uneasy about that because that assumption, like I said, it becomes a general acceptance that this is the way things are. And then people don't look at potential alternatives. Um, and we've probably been a bit too accepting of the burden of this debt across the whole of West Surrey. And we
So
should be,
sorry, Claire, but where is the protest? Where are people shouting about this and saying this isn't fair, this isn't right? You've got to stop it.
okay, so there is protest from people who are realizing on the doorstep when we first started canvassing, there was people did not appreciate what the debt burden would mean or could mean for West Surrey, for Guildford, for Southwest, for Guildford Southwest. As we've talked to people over the last few weeks, there has been an increasing awareness of the consequences or potential consequences of this debt and being told that you have to pay it off. So I think the protest is building. I think the anger and frustration is building. And that is why I would encourage people to organise, go and attend the council meetings, write letters.
But why aren't you, for instance, let me put it back to you. Why aren't you writing letters to me as the editor of the Guildford Dragon or an opinion piece to say this is outrageous?
You make that's a good question, Martin, and I'm going to have to go away and think about that.
Okay, fair enough.
You're
Fair
quite
enough.
right. You're
Okay.
quite right.
Now, that's great because if you, I hope you do think about it, and I hope you do write in, and I hope all I'm not just for the Greens, for all the political spectrum. I'd love people to write in, council, politicians especially, to say what they feel about this, and because it is a really big issue, I believe. Okay, now looking at your pamphlet, it does seem to me that there are very few commitments in there. And I think personally, I think that's understandable, given that none of us know what money anyone's going to have to spend. So I think that's forgivable in many ways. But nonetheless, I want to just put a couple of things to you. You say you want to be focused on what matters to residents, but there's no mention of potholes. They matter to residents, don't they?
They they do matter to residents, yes. Um, and often when we've been on the doorstep, that's one of the very clear complaints that comes through, or one of the issues that residents raise. But it's not just potholes. It's the general quality of roads, and it's the quality of pavements. Um, sorry, I'm just going to get hold of mine. So there would have to be a priority on fixing the roads, potholes, and the bit of road around potholes, to try and make sure that it doesn't reoccur. There are quality issues about
What do you
being
think's gone
maintenance
wrong with
problems.
the management of the roads?
Ah, what do I think has gone wrong with the management of the roads? I would suggest that the methods used for fixing the potholes are poor quality methods. The materials used are poor quality. That maybe that has something to do with the contracts that have been set up between the council and third-party contractors, and that perhaps those contracts need to be reviewed in light of the problems that we've experienced with deteriorating road quality.
Would you bring that service in-house, or would you remain to outsourced?
I think it would be better to bring it in-house,
Okay.
because for the reasons that it could be more cost effective to bring it in-house, and there may well be greater control over when potholes are fixed, the materials that are used to fix them, um, and the frequency with
So
which people go out
you
and
think that
inspect
could be
roads.
more cost effective? In other words, a better, a more efficient use of resources, funding.
I believe that there is an opportunity there to make a more efficient
Have
use.
you studied that though?
Have I studied that?
Yeah. Have you
Um,
looked at the sums?
I have briefly looked at sums from Waverley Borough Council. Sorry, sums is the wrong word. About some of the narrative evidence from Waverley Borough Council, which suggests that it may be more cost effective. And it
Okay.
is suggests, um, but it does bring the opportunity to have a great deal more control about how potholes are fixed and roads are attended to.
Okay. Now the green belt is another thing that a lot of people care about. And in your pamphlet, you say you want to protect it, but you also say that you're looking for developments that protect green spaces. How can developments protect green spaces? Don't they use up green spaces?
Could you point me to where we've written that,
Um,
please?
yes, it's not point number 5. If I hold up you can't see it.
Okay,
Point
got
number
you.
5, this one,
Yep, thank you. Um, okay, so this would be about using brownfield sites.
right?
So rather than going straight into green spaces, so protecting the green spaces by developing on brownfield sites.
But has Guildford got sufficient brownfield sites?
Um, I think it has some, but
But for the housing
we will have
target we've
to,
been given,
sorry, so for the housing target that we've been given, um, within town, it does have greenfield spaces. That housing target, I believe that that is currently under review as part of the review of the local plan. And the original housing target, which has now been doubled, but the original housing target was based on flawed data, according to the Office of National Statistics. The key point being that they had overestimated the number of students
Yeah.
from university who remained in town after
Hmm.
they completed their studies. So at the moment, I'm not aware that that particular number has been reviewed, but obviously if that number was to decrease based on what the Office of National Statistics has said, then it would reduce the doubling. It's still going to be a big number for a town the size of Guildford to cope with.
But nationally, you want to build more houses, don't you?
Greens want to build more social housing.
Right. So that's a good point. What prevents existing councils from building social housing?
Um,
It's money, isn't it? Well,
yeah,
one of them.
money.
They've got to buy the land to
Money.
build them on.
Yeah. So
So
with
unless the debt issue's resolved, you're not going to be able to build social housing unless you've got the money to buy the land, are you?
then this is a good point. Um, it would be necessary to look at the land that the council owns and make judgments on so okay, so we're banned from borrowing. It would be necessary to look at the land that the council owns and evaluate it, not just automatically go to a default position of saying we're building, but actually evaluate it and say, is this a sensible place to build?
Okay. And if I can go back to the roads for a second, obviously mo motor vehicles, or at least the ones that burn petrol or oil, are part of the problem of emissions. So isn't improving roads actually counter to the desire to decrease emissions?
I don't think so. I don't think so because um, if every car was an electric car, for example, they're still going to experience the same difficulties with potholes and poor quality roads. So from that perspective, it makes sense to be putting some effort into and resource into maintaining the roads.
But what about other I think you're as a party you're keen on improving bus transport, for instance, to try and
Yes.
decrease the amount of vehicles on the road and also cycling. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what could you do locally here in Guildford to promote those two policies? I know, let's put the debt issue to one side. If you could if you had some money to use on those issues, what kind of things would you do?
Um, so for example, with the buses,
Yes,
uh, as the contracts expire for with the bus companies,
yes.
I would suggest that the situation be reviewed as each contract comes to its natural end and look at how that possible bus route could be provided in-house. So the planning of it, the mapping of the routes, etc., be done in-house so that it would also hopefully provide routes that are more targeted at what local people want. So perhaps a greater focus on the routes that link the villages. There is also the possibility that with the greater geographical area of West Surrey, that the offering from third-party contractor bus companies would be more cost efficient because they would be able to do longer journeys between the major towns in West Surrey, and that hopefully would provide a better service for bus users and would provide a genuine alternative for motorists to get out of their cars and be able to use the bus service. There is also it's also worthwhile looking at the links between trains and buses.
Well, that's a
However,
good. Sorry to interrupt, but that's a very good point in Guildford because there isn't on lots of routes. I mean, I live in St. Catherine's. If I catch a bus here to go into the town, if I wanted to catch a train, I mean, I can walk, but for some people with less mobility, they might find that difficult or they have less time. Um, the bus doesn't stop outside the station.
No, it doesn't. And that needs, well, hopefully that will change with the developments that are going
I mean, it's
on because
tricky because of the gyratory. I mean, it's not an easy problem, but it
yeah.
is the kind of thing that needs to be addressed, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That those links making it easy for people to get the train, to get a bus, or to pick up a barrel bike, or to be able to walk into town. So pedestrianisation is important. I grant you that the gyratory system makes full pedestrianisation between the station and North Street and the High Street very difficult. But maybe there is something there that could be explored with people who are experienced in this kind of development, uh, town-based development, to make things easier for people once they arrive at the train station. But I also think there is something around with the trains, it has to be a cross-boundary um, viewpoint as well,
Okay.
because there are so many trains crossing our different boundaries and linking up with buses and other local transport.
Now, finally, a more general point. A lot of people, quite a few politicians now are saying we can't afford net zero. What would you say to them?
I would say that that might well turn out to be a false economy. There are a lot of benefits to come from the idea of net zero. So reductions in pollution for both air and water, um, just making a more pleasant environment, temperature reductions, and cutting bills. So, for example, if you've got providing insulation or making sure new builds have decent insulation, um, providing subsidies for insulation in existing houses, that can help to cut people's bills. Um, yes,
Okay. Well, we've come to the end of our time, but Claire Whitehouse, thank you very much.
thank you, Martin, and to the Guildford Dragon.
Thank you.